Petersburg's super cute. They call it Little Norway. They turned out to protest in Petersburg, Alaska against Trump this weekend. Hey, Elon, Mars beckons. And that's just a snapshot of one state. That's just Alaska. That was kind of on fuego this weekend. But, you know, if you want to generalize, I think, about how the protests against Trump are evolving now that we're 90 whatever days in, I would say that the media is now covering these protests more and more. And I think that's part because there's a lot of them and they're big. I think it's also maybe because the media is realizing that Trump is only getting less and less popular with each passing day in each new poll. This protest movement to the media, I think, seems like a tangible way to see and describe and report on that. In terms of other changes and evolutions in the anti-Trump movement, I would say for this weekend in particular, one other change we saw is that in a lot of places, people added food drives and clothing drives and other really practical efforts to build donations for food pantries and other local resources that have been hit so hard by Trump's cuts. And those food drives happened alongside the marches and rallies, which is really constructive. I would also say in general that we are, if you want a generalized perception of what's going on in terms of how this movement is changing, I would say we're seeing more protests in red states and in Republican areas of blue or purple states. I mean, that's my impression from looking at all the footage that I have looked at from this weekend's events. Here's some more. Here's Amarillo, Texas this weekend. Here's the big turnout they got in Atlanta, Georgia this weekend. Tons of people turned out in Atlanta. Really big turnout in Boise, Idaho. Boise again and again and again has been turning out huge numbers of people in Idaho. Here's Carson City, Nevada. Look how many people turned out in Carson City, including outside the state legislature building there. Carson City, of course, the capital. Thousands of people turned out to protest in Chicago once again. Chicago definitely showing up. Here's Clarksburg, West Virginia, outside the Harrison County Courthouse. Here's Cincinnati on the left side of your screen. Here's Columbus on the right side of your screen. Ohio has been turning out a lot of anti-Trump protests throughout this past 90 days. This weekend was no exception in Ohio. Here's Michigan. Here's Detroit on the left side of your screen and Grand Rapids on the right side of your screen. Michigan, like Ohio, has been turning out lots and lots of Trump protests with big crowds. This was Saturday in Detroit and in Grand Rapids. There was big crowd protesting in Denver this weekend, yet again. Denver, Colorado. Also, Fargo, North Dakota turned up this weekend. People along the main drag there in Fargo. Concord, Massachusetts. They celebrated the 250th anniversary on Saturday of the first battle of the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Lexington and Concord. The anti-tyranny, no kings theme dovetailed very well between the commemoration of the American Revolution and the many people who turned out there to protest against Trump at the same time. Let's do a few more of these. This is left to right, top to bottom. That's Huntersville, North Carolina. Really big, impressive turnout in Los Angeles. Morgantown, West Virginia, where they have been hit very hard by Trump destroying federal offices and agencies. Lower left, that's Mobile, Alabama. Lower center, that's New Haven, Connecticut. And lower right there, that's Raleigh, North Carolina. They had a really big turnout in Raleigh. Look at that crowd. Here's another group. Upper left, that's West Caldwell, New Jersey. Upper center, that's Portland, Maine. On the right, on the top, that's Newton, New Jersey. Lower left, that's Westmont, Illinois. Mesa, Arizona in the center on the bottom there. And beautiful Livingston, Montana on the lower right. We saw big protests this weekend in Greenville, South Carolina, and in Springfield, Ohio, which you will remember. That's where Donald Trump and J.D. Vance attacked Haitian immigrants in perverse terms. Lots of protesters out in San Diego, California. New Orleans, people turned out in the French Quarter to protest. We say no to deportations, protect immigrant rights. Sacramento, California, big turnout in their Trump protest this weekend. Norwalk, Connecticut. Surprise, Arizona. Topeka, Kansas. Here's just a couple more. Look at the big crowd in Topeka. This was Rock Hill, South Carolina. The Easter Bunny says, hop away from fascism. No more rotten eggs in the White House. Here's a look at St. Paul, Minnesota, where they turned out just a look at this, very, very large crowd of people to protest against Trump this weekend. Again, in St. Paul. They keep doing this. And I could go on and on and on for a very long time with this. The first 50-51 protests, and again, 50-51 stands for 50 protests in 50 states on one day. The first one that they held was in February. It was mostly at state capitals. They actually had more than 50 protests that day, but less than 100. Now, in April, in the same month, we had one day with over 1,000 simultaneous protests, another one this weekend with over 900 simultaneous protests. I mean, some of these protests this week, this month, we've seen tens of thousands of people, a few that topped 100,000 people. It sounds like the next one of these is not going to be on a Saturday. It's going to be on May Day, on Thursday, May 1st. We shall see. But again, I think in general, what we are seeing is that more of the media is figuring out that this is quite a thing. This is not business as usual. This is quite a thing that is happening over and over again at state capitals and on overpasses and on town squares and on street corners and in all sorts of unexpected places, including the reddest of red states. My sense is that as Trump's poll numbers continue to drop, not only are the protests going to grow and spread, but they're going to get more and more attention as well as the dominant news narrative in the country becomes not just what it has been, which is the failures and mistakes and scandals of the administration, the damage Trump is doing. But I think the dominant narrative in the country is becoming not just that disastrous behavior by Trump, but also the country saying no to him and resisting him more and more and more all the time. And that's not just a vibe or a feeling. That is a granular thing that is happening with these protests that we are seeing all over the frickin' country over and over and over again. And on the issues, on education tonight, Harvard University has launched its legal counteroffensive against the Trump administration. Harvard tonight bringing a lawsuit against the Trump administration for the way Trump has targeted and essentially tried to take over Harvard. That counteroffensive from Harvard comes as faculty at the University of Michigan and the University of Washington have both just voted that those universities should join a mutual academic defense compact with other similarly situated universities so they can all band together to defend themselves as a group when Trump inevitably comes for those institutions as well. The financial markets continue to just reject and repel Trump like he is a magnet turned around the wrong way. Here's part of the lead story at the Wall Street Journal tonight. Quote, the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped around 972 points today and is on pace for its worst April since 1932. The dollar hit fresh multi-year lows against the euro and other major currencies. Yields on long-term treasuries, which rise when bond prices fall, climbed. When treasury yields climb, that's bad. Oil prices slid. Gold rose to a record. Trump's renewed threats to Fed Chairman Jerome Powell's job marked a new source of uncertainty for investors who said eroding confidence in the independence of the U.S. central bank could deal a significant blow to the value of stocks, bonds, and the dollar. While Trump made similar threats against the Fed in his prior term, investors now worry that tariffs could rekindle pandemic-era inflation, requiring the central bank to keep rates higher, not lower. Some worry that recent declines in stocks, bonds, and the dollar, which has become known as the Sell America trade, point to a shift in capital flows that undermines the U.S.'s long-standing primacy in global markets. In other words, Donald Trump is not just tanking the financial markets, he's potentially destroying America's economic status in an irreversible way. The other headlines on the right-wing pages of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page right now also sort of tell the story right now. Quote, America gets Trump fatigue. This was actually from a few days ago. It's still posted prominently at the opinion page website. America gets Trump fatigue. Also, is Trump a tyrant or a savior? Maybe just a bumbler. That counts as good news for Trump right now in the financial press. The Wall Street Journal also warning that Trump now appears to be possessed of economic plans that are, quote, an even dumber idea than tariffs. That's what the way they put it in the headline. Amid the markets just rejecting everything Trump is doing and sloshing into the muddy depths again today, the automobile company that is owned by the president's top campaign donor, that's doing particularly poorly, even against a market that itself is doing very poorly. Here's the Journal again tonight. Quote, the past few months have been particularly punishing for Tesla, which fell about 5.8% today. Tesla's shares have plummeted 44% in